This is the Leica 50mm Summicron dual range, one of Leica's finest lenses. 50,000 copies were produced from 1956 to 1968 in two different versions, with minor differences in markings. Otherwise, they're optically more or less identical. The build quality of the 50mm DR is phenomenal, and some claim that it's the pinnacle of construction in the range of Leica lenses. To this point, all 50mm dual-range lenses are constructed almost completely of brass, which gives them a really hefty weight, more than 100 grams heavier than comparable aluminum Summicrons. Ergonomically, this lens functions very well, with some small caveats. The focus and aperture rings are exceptionally smooth, especially when well CLA'd by a professional. The focus ring also has a phenomenal pattern that alternates between smooth humps and knurled grooves, allowing the lens to be focused from any angle. The only gripe I have with this lens comes from the aperture ring, which is only knurled in two spots directly opposite from one another. I often set my aperture and leave it until I need to adjust exposure, and using this lens I often have to search for the grip to change the aperture, causing me to miss shots. Now, I haven't read of other reviewers having the same issue, but every 50mm Summicron lens after the DR has more generously proportioned knurling on the aperture ring. One quirk of this lens is the actual mounting. In general, I would suggest always mounting this lens with it focused at infinity, otherwise you may run into troubles with getting it onto the camera. I presume that this is due to the unique close focus range. Now this brings us to why it's called the dual range. This lens, unique for a rangefinder, can focus all the way down to 20 inches or 50 centimeters, which gives it a reproduction ratio of 1 to 7.5. Now, this is really impressive when you consider that the modern Leica 90mm macro f4 has a reproduction ratio of 1 to 6.7 when using the rangefinder, which is only slightly better. To switch from the far focus range to the short focus range, pull the focus ring outward and over the nib separating the two ranges. Attach the goggles and you're in the close focusing range. The goggles add a small zoom to the rangefinder and adjust for the close distance parallax. In my experience, rangefinder focusing remains extremely accurate in the close focus range. Now, all things considered, a lot of photographers may not even use the close focus range regularly, but if you are the Leica M photographer who needs it, then this lens may be indispensable for you. One more thing before image quality. This lens only mounts properly on a couple of cameras. It's compatible with the M3 and Leica M6 non-TTL and all cameras in between, as well as the Leica CL and Minolta CLE, but the goggles will not line up on those cameras. New Leica camera compatibility is shoddy, and there's lots of conflicting information online, so I can only suggest that you try before you buy, if possible. Despite the age of this lens, it's still objectively sharp, for everything but the most technical work. I would even say it's tremendously sharp when stopped down to f5.6 or f8. When using this lens at its widest aperture, there's a very agreeable smoothness that works wonderfully for portraits. Alright, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the background roll-off and bokeh that you're going to get on this lens. So as you can see in this image, this is a photo of condensation on top of a car, and there's not really any bokeh in it, but as you can see right up here, you can kind of see a little bit of swirliness in the rendition of the background as it blends into the foreground, and that's something that you're going to get on a lot of older Leica lenses. I really like that. It's not like Heliar or like Helios level swirly, but it's just a tiny little bit. It just gives it a little bit of flavor. I don't think that the bokeh on this lens will ever distract you from an image or worsen your image. It's an f2 lens, so you're not going to get the craziest bokeh ever, but I think it's good. As you can see, the background is totally smooth. Whenever you get this close, whenever you're in the close focus range, the backgrounds are smooth. They're very, very smooth. Here's another example of that. I think I took this shot on accident. Anyways, this kind of shows you how the bokeh looks if you want to get a texture of it. I mean, in the center, it's all circular. I guess as you move towards the edges, it gets a little bit more cat eye-y. But I mean, for the most part, it looks good. And whenever you're in the close focus range, it looks really good. Despite its age, this lens is very well adjusted for color photography. You may be able to get some chromatic aberration out of it if you use it on a digital sensor, but you'll never get that on film. I also would generally argue that this is a lens for film photography, and would recommend against buying it for digital. For lots of photographers, this lens is known for its tones in black and white. Very few lenses can create the soft changes in gradient from black to white that make photos taken on this lens so appealing. Photos taken on this lens are in a way the antithesis to those of my Zeiss ZM lenses. Those lenses produce an absurdly sharp image with bucket loads of micro contrast. They produce images that feel like they have slightly less grays than the DR straight-on scans. The 50mm DR is an iconic lens that is not going to be replaced by any lens produced now or later. It's not good for everything, but it's the king of its niche. So as far as if I recommend this lens, yes, absolutely. If you appreciate the mildly vintage aesthetic of the images produced by the 50DR, then yeah, absolutely, buy it. Do not buy it if you're just going to pixel peep it on a digital sensor. It's like eating soup with a fork, or buying a Leica M camera to shoot sports. Just understand what you're buying, and understand its limitations, because I don't want people in my comments sections complaining because they bought it because I said it's perfect, without considering that something can be perfect and be bad at things that it was never intended for. You can find DRs on eBay and other resellers like KEH, but if you truly want to find them in the best condition, you're probably going to want to go to the enthusiasts that browse forums like Fred Miranda, Rangefinder Forum, and Leica Forum. It's going to be more difficult to find a good condition copy than usual. There's still plenty of good ones out there if you know where to look. You're probably going to end up spending anywhere from $1,250 US to $2,000 US on buying a decent to good copy plus CLA, UV filter, and lens hood. It's really not all that expensive for a Leica lens. There's only one alternative if you want the same image quality, by the way, that being the Summicron Rigid, which has the same optics but doesn't close focus. It also costs a similar price. When it comes to taking care of your 50DR, I would highly recommend that you get it CLA'd if it wasn't recently, and use a UV filter and a lens hood to keep the lens in good condition and give it a little bit of extra protection against falls. The UV filter you're going to want is the Leica E39 UV2, which is absurdly expensive, but it's also the only UV filter that matches this lens perfectly. The lens hood you're going to want is called the Leica 12585 Vented Lens Hood. 842 clip-on hoods should also work, as well as 39mm filter thread screw-in hoods, but the 12585 is the OG. My name is Drew Waddell, and I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, then please make sure to like and subscribe down below, and if you've really enjoyed it and you want to support what I do on this channel, then you can always buy me a coffee with a link in the description below. Now, I promise new videos are coming at a pace faster than once a month. I got a little bit slowed down, but we're going to get back on it. And make sure to subscribe to see those. Once again, my name is Drew Waddell. Thanks for watching the video, and have a good one.